My name is Helen. I'm 85 years old. And 3 weeks ago, I heard my name for the first time in 7 months. 7 months. I know because I went back through my calendar, my phone calls, my doctor visits. I checked everything. And the last person who called me Helen was a telemarketer. A telemarketer reading from a script. "Is this Helen Holloway?" I said yes, and I didn't hang up for 5 minutes, even though I knew it was a scam, because hearing my name felt like water after days in the desert. The woman at the grocery store calls me ma'am. My doctor calls me Mrs. Holloway. My son calls me Mom. My grandchildren call me Grandma. The nurse at my checkup last week called me Sweetie. I'm 85 years old. I've lived through wars, raised 2 children, buried a husband, survived cancer, and a 22-year-old nurse called me Sweetie, like I'm a child, like I don't have a name. But here's what keeps me up at night. I can't remember the last time I called someone else by their name either. Not really. I say doctor, I say the girl at the front desk, I say my neighbor. But their names? Gone. And I don't know when I stopped paying attention. I grew up in a town so small, everyone knew everyone. Mr. Dawson ran the hardware store and knew I was saving up for a bicycle. Every time I walked past, he'd say, "How's the fun comin', Helen?" Not little girl, not sweetheart, Helen, like I was a person with a goal he cared about. Mrs. Keene next door would holler, "Helen Marie, tell your mama I've got fresh eggs." Even the mailman, Tom Bradshaw, wore the same blue cap every single day, would hand me letters and say, "Anything exciting today, Helen?" My name was proof I existed, proof I mattered, not as someone something, just as me. I was 19 when I met Donald at a church dance. He walked right up to me and said, "You're Helen, right?" Not, "Hey, beautiful," not, "What's your name, doll?" He already knew. He'd asked around. And when he said my name, it felt like he'd been looking for me specifically, not just any girl, me. On our second date, he started calling me Nell. "Nell," he said, "you ever think about leaving this town?" No one else called me that, just him. It was his name for me, secret, ours. We were married 53 years, and for 53 years, I was Nell to someone. He died 6 years ago, and Nell died with him. What nobody tells you about grief is how quiet it makes you. After Donald's funeral, people came by for weeks. Casseroles, cards, condolences. "How are you doing?" "He's in a better place." "Call if you need anything." Kind words, true words. But not once did anyone say, "Helen, what do you need?" It was like I'd been swallowed by his death. I wasn't Helen anymore. I was the widow, the poor thing, her. And I let it happen. I smiled, said thank you, accepted the casseroles, because that's what you do. You don't make a fuss. You don't say, "Actually, I'm disappearing and I don't know how to stop." But I'm telling you now, I'm disappearing. And I think I've been disappearing for a long time. There was a woman named Claire. We worked together at the public library for 19 years. 19 years. We had lunch every Thursday, same table, same diner. She knew I took my coffee black. I knew she was allergic to shellfish. We talked about books, about her awful ex-husband, about my kids, about everything.
And then she retired, June 14th, 2018. There was cake in the break room, a card we all signed. I wrote, "You'll be missed, Claire." And I meant it. But I never visited her, not once. I told myself I would, next month, after the holidays, when things slowed down. But things never slow down. And then Donald got sick, and then he died, and then I was just trying to survive. Claire died 4 years ago. I found out from an obituary. Claire Brennan, 79, beloved teacher and librarian. I stared at that obituary for 20 minutes, and I realized I didn't know where she lived. I didn't know if she had kids. I didn't even know her middle name. 19 years of Thursdays, and I didn't really know her. Because somewhere along the way, she stopped being Claire. She became my coworker, then the woman I used to work with, then nothing. I didn't go to her funeral. I told myself it was because I didn't know the details, but that's a lie. I could have found out. The truth is, I was ashamed that I'd let someone I cared about become invisible, and terrified that I was next.
I have a son named Michael. He calls every Sunday at 2 p.m. You could set your watch by it. The phone rings. I answer. "Hi, Mom, how are you feeling?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. How are you?" And then he talks about work, the weather, his daughter's volleyball tournaments. He's a good son. He really is. But somewhere in the middle of these calls, I started to notice something. He never asks me anything real. He doesn't say, "What did you do this week?" Or, "What are you thinking about?" Or, "Mom, are you lonely?" He asks if I'm feeling okay, like I'm a plant he's checking on. "Still alive? Good. Talk to you next week." And here's the worst part. I don't blame him, because what would I even say? That I sat in this apartment for 6 days and didn't speak to a single person? That I watched the same judge shows and can't remember which cases I've already seen? That sometimes I talk to myself just to hear a voice? He doesn't want to hear that. Nobody does. So I say, I'm fine, and he believes me, because it's easier. Last Sunday, we were on the phone, and he was telling me about some project at work. I wasn't really listening. I was watching the window, watching people walk by on the street below, and I thought, he hasn't said my name in months. So I tested it. I stayed quiet, didn't respond, just to see if he'd notice. He kept talking for 30 seconds before he said, "Mom, you there?" Mom, not Helen. And I said, "Yes, I'm here." But I wasn't. Not really. My daughter Amy is different. She visits, brings groceries, checks my prescriptions. She's the responsible one. But when she talks to me, I can see her watching the clock. She's got 20 minutes. I have a son named Michael. He calls every Sunday at 2 p.m. You could set your watch by it. The phone rings. I answer. "Hi, Mom, how are you feeling?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. How are you?" And then he talks about work, the weather, his daughter's volleyball tournaments. He's a good son. He really is. But somewhere in the middle of these calls, I started to notice something. He never asks me anything real. He doesn't say, "What did you do this week?" Or, "What are you thinking about?" Or, "Mom, are you lonely?" He asks if I'm feeling okay, like I'm a plant he's checking on. "Still alive? Good. Talk to you next week." And here's the worst part. I don't blame him, because what would I even say? That I sat in this apartment for 6 days and didn't speak to a single person? That I watched the same judge shows and can't remember which cases I've already seen? that sometimes I talk to myself just to hear a voice. He doesn't want to hear that. Nobody does. So I say, I'm fine, and he believes me, because it's easier. Last Sunday, we were on the phone, and he was telling me about some project at work. I wasn't really listening. I was watching the window, watching people walk by on the street below, and I thought, he hasn't said my name in months. So I tested it. I stayed quiet, didn't respond, just to see if he'd notice. He kept talking for 30 seconds before he said, "Mom, you there?" Mom, not Helen. And I said, "Yes, I'm here." But I wasn't. Not really. My daughter Amy is different. She visits, brings groceries, checks my prescriptions. She's the responsible one. But when she talks to me, I can see her watching the clock. She's got 20 minutes, maybe 30. Then she's got to get back to the kids, back to her life. And I get it. I do. But sometimes I want to grab her hand and say, "Amy, do you remember who I was before I was your mother?" Because I don't think she does. I don't think she's ever thought about it. There's a photo on my mantle, black and white, creased at the corner. It's me at 22, standing outside a diner in Boston. I'm wearing a dress I made myself, navy blue with white buttons, hair curled, lipstick dark, and I'm smiling, not a polite smile, a real one, because I'd just gotten hired at a publishing house, Marshall and Fitch, 3rd floor, corner of Tremont and Park. I was an editorial assistant, which sounds fancy, but really meant I typed manuscripts and answered phones. But I loved it. I loved riding the train into the city every morning, loved the clack of typewriters and the smell of coffee and ink, loved when my boss, Mr. Carver, would stick his head out of his office and say, "Helen, pull the Dawson file for me, would you?" Helen, not sweetheart, not honey. Helen, who was good at her job. Helen, who had a future. I worked there for 3 years, and then I met Donald, and we got married, and I got pregnant, and Mr. Carver took me to lunch on my last day and said, "You're making a mistake, Helen." Not cruel, just honest. "You're good at this. You could have a real career here." But I laughed. I said, "I'm going to have a baby. That's a real career." And I meant it. I really did. But sometimes, late at night, I take that photo down and I look at that girl, and I think, what would she say if she could see me now? Would she recognize me? Would she be proud? Or would she ask, "What happened to you, Helen?" I'm not saying I regret my life. I don't. I loved Donald. I love my children. But I wish someone had told me that you can lose yourself in inches, that one day you'll wake up and realize you don't know who you are anymore because you've been someone's wife for so long, someone's mother, someone's grandmother, and those are beautiful things, but they're not your name. There's a woman who lives 3 doors down. I see her sometimes in the hallway. She's about my age, maybe a little younger, always dressed nicely, hair done, lipstick. We nod when we pass. Morning, morning. That's it. Last week I saw her in the lobby struggling with her groceries. 2 bags, too heavy. I almost kept walking. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't want to embarrass her. Maybe because I was embarrassed. 2 old women who can barely carry groceries. But I stopped, and I said, "Let me help you." She looked up, surprised. "Oh, thank you." We carried them to the elevator together. Didn't say much, just small talk about the weather, the broken elevator, the landlord who never fixes anything. But when we got to her floor, she turned to me and she said, "I'm Diane, by the way." "Helen," I said, and she smiled. "I know, I've seen your name on the mailbox. I've seen yours too." We stood there for a moment, and then she said,
We should have coffee sometime." "I'd like that," I said, and I meant it. But here's the thing, I don't think we will, because that's what people say. We should get together, let's have lunch. And then weeks pass and you don't, and eventually you stop seeing each other in the hall. And one day you hear she moved or died, and you think, I should have had coffee with her.
I called Diane 2 days later. I got her number from the building directory. My hands were shaking when I dialed, because what if she didn't remember me? What if she was just being polite in the hallway? The phone rang 3 times. Then, "Hello? Diane? It's Helen from down the hall." Silence, just for a second, long enough for me to think this was a mistake. And then, "Helen, I'm so glad you called. We met for coffee yesterday, not at some cafe, just in her apartment. She made it in an old percolator that looked like it was from 1975. And we talked, really talked. She told me about her husband who died 8 years ago, about her son in California who never calls, about how she taught piano for 40 years and now can't play anymore because of arthritis. And I told her about Donald, about the library, about how I feel like I'm disappearing. And here's what she said. She said, "I thought it was just me." That's it. I thought it was just me. We sat there for 2 hours, and when I left, she hugged me. A real hug, not a polite pat on the back. And she said, "Thank you, Helen." Helen, not dear, not sweetie. Helen. I've been thinking about that all week. How simple it was. Coffee, conversation, a name. And how much it meant. How much it changed things. Because here's what I've realized. We do this to each other. We stop using names. We stop seeing each other as real people with full lives. We become categories. The elderly, the neighbor, the cashier, the widow. And it's nobody's fault. It's just what happens when life gets busy. When you're rushing through the grocery store, through the doctor's office, through life, you forget. You forget that every person you pass has a name, has a story, has a whole universe inside them. My mother's name was Virginia, but I called her Ma. Everyone did. She lived with us her last 5 years after my father died. She'd sit in the living room every day, same chair, hands in her lap, staring out the window. And I'd bring her tea, ask if she needed anything. But I was always busy. Kids to raise, a husband to take care of, a house to run. I'd say, "You okay, Ma?" And she'd nod. But I don't think I ever really asked. Not the way you ask someone you truly see. I never said, "Virginia, what are you thinking about? Virginia, what do you miss? Virginia, are you scared?" She died on a Tuesday, quietly in her sleep. And at the funeral, people said she lived a good long life. And maybe she did, but I'll never know, because I never asked. I think about all the questions I didn't ask. To her, to Donald, to Claire, to everyone I've ever loved. All the times I could have said their names and didn't. All the times I could have really looked at them, not as what they were to me,
but as who they were. It's too late for most of them, but it's not too late for everyone. I called my son yesterday, not on Sunday, on a Thursday. He answered, confused. "Mom, is everything all right?" "I'm fine," I said. "I just wanted to talk to you." "Oh, okay. What's going on?" And I realized I didn't have a script. I just wanted to hear his voice, to talk to him like a person, not just a son checking on his aging mother. So I said, "Tell me about your week, Michael." My week? "Yeah, what's been on your mind?" There was a pause, and then he started talking, really talking, about a fight he had with his wife, about how stressed he is at work, about how he worries he's not a good enough father, things he's never told me before. And when we hung up, 40 minutes later, he said something he hasn't said in years. He said, "Thanks, Mom, I needed that." I'm going to knock on Diane's door tomorrow, not because I need coffee, because I want to say her name again, to remind both of us that we're still here, still real. And I'm going to start doing something else, too. When I go to the grocery store, I'm going to read the cashier's name tag, and I'm going to use it. "Thank you, Sarah. Have a good day, Marcus." Because maybe it'll mean something to them, or maybe it won't, but it'll mean something to me. My name is Helen. I'm 85 years old, and I'm still here. I'm not just the woman in 4B. I'm not just someone's mother or someone's grandmother. I'm Helen. I grew up in Vermont. I worked at a publishing house in Boston. I made my own wedding dress. I survived cancer. I've loved, lost, failed, tried again. I'm a whole person, and so are you. So if you're watching this, I want you to do something for me. Tomorrow, say someone's name. Your parents, your neighbor, the person who makes your coffee. Look at them. Really look at them. See them. Because one day you'll be old too, and you'll want someone to see you, not as what you've become, but as who you've always been.
And if this story meant something to you, if it made you think about someone you haven't called, someone whose name you haven't said, leave a comment. Tell me their name. Say it out loud, even if just here. Sometimes that's all it takes to bring someone back from disappearing. My name is Helen, and I'm still here.